And we are back. What is going on, Pacer Nation? Welcome back to another episode of Bring the Juice Pacers. Your guys, Derek and Cody, with you. And guys, we wanted to chat about the Indiana Pacers. We haven't really gotten a chance to do a ton of these different videos outside of a few recaps from some of these games. You know, with free agency kind of being around here and everybody talking about free agency in Indianapolis right now, it is definitely more taking the lead on the content side of things, but wanted to chat a little bit about the Indiana Pacers. Currently, Pacers sitting at a record of 37-30. That leaves them tied for sixth in the Eastern Conference with the 76ers right now. And after a loss to the Chicago Bulls, which was definitely a very tough one to say the least. Cody, how do you feel right now about where the Pacers are at in their standings and how they're playing the game of basketball right now?
It's definitely frustrating to watch the Pacers because I believe it's 2-10 now on back-to-back games this year. It's just been not good, and against inferior competition a lot of times. Teams that are worse than you record-wise, and so it's weird, Derek, how the Pacers this year, they actually have a pretty decent record against like some of the better teams with a winning record and things like that. But for whatever reason, Derek, they really have struggled against some of these bottom of the barrel teams, some of these teams they should beat, not only beat, but beat by a lot. And I don't really know what the deal is with the Pacers. And, obviously in regards to the Bulls game, wasn't able to get to that recap because I know it was a long day for us yesterday on Wednesday for that game. But definitely a frustrating game because you thought the Pacers had it, and then they kind of blew it at the end of the day. So, Derek, I think it's frustrating because this team is so hot and cold. It's so one game, they're beating the best team, one of the best teams in the NBA, and the next game they're losing. They lost to a team in overtime that isn't even in the playoff picture right now, and so it's very frustrating how that works and how that's consistently been something for the Pacers this year, where for whatever reason, they just haven't been able to win some of these games that they should win. Even in the ugly games, there's been some games where you're like, even if you're playing terrible, you need to find ways to win, and the Pacers just haven't. And, again, I know, there's been some inconsistencies with certain players, but Derek, I really do put a lot of this on Rick Carlisle. I really do feel like Rick Carlisle has not done a great job at times being able to help his team kind of establish an identity, and this team is so inconsistent, and we see the flashes and then we see the inconsistencies. And I know to some degree, Derek, you're going to have that with the young team. But again, this is the team that people were projecting to be, NBA, title contenders for the next number of years when they added Pascal Siakam. And it's just been so disappointing. And it's not like Siakam's been a bad addition. That's the weird thing, Derek. Siakam's been really good. But the Pacers, for whatever reason, they've just been so up and down in this stretch. And you do wonder, man, if you were able to take care of business against some of these bottom of the barrel teams, some of these teams you should routinely beat, I think this Pacers team would be a top 4 seed, if not higher. I really do believe that. But that's been the issue. They just have been so inconsistent this year where one game they look like they could beat anybody, and one game they can lose to anybody. Really, they can. And so I just really think that there's a lot that they need to iron out, they need to figure out, because it does seem like, Derek, it's not even just like teams are just flat out outplaying them. It just seems like there's some really fundamental things that the Pacers aren't doing at times, like that should be routine things that NBA teams should do. And really, championship type of teams, playoff teams should do that. There are times when the Pacers do it, but there's times when the Pacers don't do it. And so that's why they're sitting here right now, Derek, right on the edge of the playoffs, right outside right now of, the play-in. And they're very close. They're cutting it close here with only, a couple more weeks here to go. And so they got to figure this out, Derek. They got to really figure this out. And they got to figure out how they're going to be consistent and not go from all of a sudden, you can't miss anything to the next game. You can't hit anything. You can't play any defense. You can't do the fundamental things right. And I do think, obviously, the players need to step it up. But I also think in certain ways, Derek, it starts and ends with your head coach. And we've seen this year consistently the Pacers not responding to when they need to respond. So that's kind of my thoughts on it. I don't know what yours are.
Yeah, I mean, I would definitely say that right now, just mainly the Pacers are being a little inconsistent. I think you hit the nail on the head there. They're playing well enough to be able to stay at the spot that they're at, but I mean, remember, this was a situation where you and I were talking about it. Like, this is an opportunity for the Indiana Pacers to be able to jump themselves up in the standings, right? But right now, Indy is just falling behind when it comes to some of these other teams. I mean, forget the. I mean, you can't even forget the back to back games. When you see a back to back game, just automatically mark it as a loss. Pacers are just virtually incapable of winning a back to back game. They just don't win them, regardless of what happens. We just don't win back to back games. It's been proven time and time again this year. Now, obviously, if you make it to the playoffs, you won't be having back to back games, but it's something you have to deal with in the regular season, and it's definitely a very concerning thing when you have some more of those kinds of games that you have to deal with where you're when at the end of March to the beginning of April, you're gonna have stretches where you're gonna be playing every other day. And who knows if the Pacers are going to be able to keep the trek that they're at. And just looking at the standings, I mean, again, the Pacers still are only 2 games out from the 4th seed, Cody. But I mean, just looking at overall, we've talked about the 76ers, right? And how they're not playing well. The Sixers have won 3 of their last 9. So the Sixers have been struggling. They've won 1 of their last 5. So they have been struggling as of late. And the Pacers still have been unable to close that gap completely because of games like what we saw the other day with the Bulls. They just are unable to close out particular games, mainly in the fourth quarter. And that's going to be something that we have to worry about because the Heat are right on our tail. And I highly doubt that the Bulls make a move for it. But I mean, look at what happened with the Magic, right? The Magic have drastically improved themselves. They went from the 10th seed all the way back in January to now they're in the 5th seed and they're a game out from being the 4th seed, right? So, I mean, we did not take advantage of opportunities like the Magic have. And if you're the Pacers, you have to start playing better. And me personally, I think most of it comes down to Tyrese Halliburton. I mean, completely honest with you, because yes, he has still been able to occur, around since he has returned from his injury, averaging around that 10 assist mark per game for sure. But defensively, just hasn't been as good. And offensively, from a sheer perspective of the turnovers and the shooting percentage, he has been off. And your star player, if he's off, you're not going to ultimately get what you want if you're wanting to take yourself to the next level. So, I mean, if the Pacers want this to work for them, you're going to have to get to a point where Tyrese Halliburton is back to shooting 50% from the field and shooting 35 plus from 3 and not having an average of 2.5 turnovers per game and all of these different things and still being able to accumulate over 10 assists per game. That's what has to be done because you're getting guys like Pascal Siakam has been phenomenal since coming here. He's been averaging 20 points, 7 rebounds, 4 assists. It's exactly what you needed from a player like him. Miles Turner, that dude's been outstanding. He has really turned it up, especially since the All-Star break. He has had multiple breakout performances for the Pacers this year, and you've had some really good guys off the bench in TJ McConnell. Obi Toppin's been playing better. And Matherin's been dealing with so many injuries that, I mean, we can't even include him in the equation. I just think the main aspect of this is the guys that are supposed to be stepping up just aren't really stepping up. You're getting some help from your other guys, but the main guy that needs to step up, I don't think he is right now. And it's got to get better for them if they want to try to win down the stretch here.
No, absolutely. Yeah, Tyrese definitely has not looked the same since, that injury for sure. You definitely need more from your all-star player. No question about it. The efficiency hasn't been there. All that stuff where it was pre, injury. It's clearly a different Tyrese Halliburton right now. And so he's got to figure it out and figure out what's going on with that. And yeah, you're right. If your star player is injured, you're going to have very inconsistent stretches. And like we've seen with the Pacers. But Derek, the reason also why I say Rick Carlisle is you just look at that Bulls game, and it just seems like major incompetence from the head coach when you're literally up, and all you have to do is not allow the Bulls, to be in position, and they're going to DeRozan. Like DeRozan's going to take that shot, but you don't play quality defense on him, or and I know people will say, well, you can't blame, the head coach for Obi Toppin not being able to get a rebound. But again, it's a simple thing, right? And even at the end of that game, at the end of overtime, DeRozan misses that second, free throw attempt. You have a timeout. Why in the world are you rushing yourself? So just like silly, stupid things there from the head coach that cost you that game. I really do believe that. And it's not the first time we've seen Rick Carlisle do very dumb things when it comes to game management and things in the game. And also, Derek, another thing in that game, which I thought was a really stupid decision by Rick Carlisle, is, you had Aaron Nesmith make that foul and he fouled out of that game. You could have used him in overtime, but for whatever stupid reason, you said we're going to have you foul out of this game, and he's out and he can't do anything in overtime. So just like dumb things like that you're like a competent head coach would not do those things. And so it's so frustrating because you're like the Pacers have a ton of talent, but it seems like obviously Tyrese needs to get back to where he was shooting. But Rick Carlisle's got to be held accountable for this, man. He's got to be held accountable because it's absolutely ridiculous that you had multiple times where you should have won that game against Chicago. But Derek, this is what I said about even when we covered the Colts and we talked about we've seen some bad head coaches in our time, especially the last couple, right? It's like you snatch defeat out of the jaws of victory. And that's what I feel like bad teams do and bad coaches allow their teams to do. You don't play to win. You play to not lose. We saw that with Chuck Pagano at times. We saw that with Frank Reich, with the Colts. And I think you see the same thing here with Rick Carlisle and the Pacers. It's like you don't do the fundamental parts of basketball, the things that you should know how to do since you were playing basketball all the way back when you were in third grade. Like you just need to know how to do these things. And you just don't, right? You just don't capitalize on the normal routine things and you lose these games you need to win, and you might have a game where you do stuff phenomenally, but then the next game, for whatever reason, especially on a back-to-back, you all of a sudden just forget how to play, like legitimate basketball. It's so frustrating to see. And again, obviously the players are the ones going out there and executing, right? No question. The players need to execute. They need to be better. But they need a head coach that's going to set them up for success. And I don't think Rick Carlisle does that all the time. I really don't. He does a great job. Obviously, he does a great job with the offensive things. Like Pacers are shooting, they're incredible. Like they're one of the best teams in the NBA, if not the best team offensively. But Derek, it's just the fundamental things that you're like, you just expect that from an NBA team. And the Pacers don't always do that. So that's my thoughts on it too.
Yep. It's gonna be wild. The Pacers, they're hanging on by a thread right now. And we were hoping that they'd kind of take advantage of the situation they're in, but they're being given a gift with the Heat still hanging in there, but then there's a significant gap between the Pacers and the 76ers versus like what we have in the 9th seed right now. And even despite the fact that the Pacers, have been able to still stay in that 7th seed, they're still lucky that the Sixers are just falling apart. So Pacers got to pull it together, man, but they don't have a lot more opportunities, fair opportunities left because, you got the Nets coming up in a few days. You have a small little home stretch here. You're going to be able to get some rest. You're going to play the Nets. You're going to play the Cavaliers, who are still red hot. And then you're going to face the Pistons here in a few days. So, if you can win 2 out of these next 3, that will go a huge way. But mean, they're gonna face some difficulties, man. They got to face the Warriors at the end of March. You're gonna face the Lakers twice. You're facing the Clippers. You're gonna face the Bulls again. They got themselves a schedule, so we'll see how they do, and we'll continue to keep you guys updated as we see more of this. But that's going to do it for this one, guys. Let us know your thoughts on the Indiana Pacers and where they stand right now. Thank you guys so much for tuning in. And as always, go Pacers.